keeping that technology alive and trying to teach us tonight. This is Andrea Strohmeyer, better known as Astro. She is the museum's educational programs coordinator, and she's put together this season this year and invited everyone. So I will let her talk about our guests tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Welcome to the October presentation of the Maritime Speaker Series. Major thank you to Shelby Soberalski for making it all the way from Ludington. In case you did not know, that Badger crossing was canceled for today. So also major thank you to Danny for getting our speaker here safely this evening. We could not have speaker series without you guys. Not also speakers, so just yourself. Friendly reminder to please mute your cell phones. If you're online, please keep yourself muted and keep your video off. That really helps our bandwidth. With that, Shelby Soberalski is the marketing director for the SS Badger Carferry. Shelby has been with the company since 2018, 19. Oh, I was so close. Anyway, and so I'm going to let Shelby take it from there. Can you hear me now? No. I can talk. I can't really sing or dance. So.
Okay. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with me tonight and to the Door County Maritime Museum for having me. It's truly an honor, and I'm very glad to be here. I heard there was a Packers game tonight, I should say. So I okay. Maybe it wasn't. I was gonna say, regardless.
When?
Sunday. Oh, it's Sunday. Okay, because I was gonna say, wow, all these people came out to watch me and not the Packers. Okay, well, we'll wait for Sunday for that. So the SS Badger, she sails from Ludington, Michigan to Manitowoc, Wisconsin. I thought I'd start tonight talking about our connection here to Door County. And so in this September 21st, 1950 newspaper article that Andrea so kindly helped me get a better copy of, it was announced that the Christie Corporation would build a second 406-foot ferry, which would eventually become the 410-foot SS Badger. And so it was actually announced in my research I did that in June of that same year that they were going to build what would become the Spartan. And in that contract, they were given an option to build a second ferry, but they had to be duplicates. So they had the contract for the first one, and then here they were announcing that they were building a second, and I have the actual printout if anyone would like to look at it, but this was September 21st, and they decided in October of 1950 that they would go ahead with that option to build the duplicate. And I found this newspaper article here on the left, which I thought was a little interesting in that the Spartan, her sister ship was built first, and then the Badger. And in this newspaper article, they announced that the C&O car ferry was having, it's quoted, but the name of car ferry has become too hot a problem for officials of the C&O, which then went on to say, too many communities have been requesting car ferries bearing their names. So from now on, the policy will be changed. Names will now be selected from colleges and universities. So it's kind of interesting because before this in Ludington, all of the car ferries that sailed in and out were City of Midland, City of Saginaw, City of Milwaukee. So then we got the Spartan. So when the Spartan was built in 1952, at that time, the marketing advertisements for the car ferry were cited as spacious, functional, and serviceable. And in some of the articles I found, it was quoted, "Gone are the days of luxurious fittings and overstuffed furniture. Gone is the feeling of being crammed in a small space. Gone are the gimcracks and the gingerbread of earlier car ferries." They wanted to focus these car ferries on being futuristic, being sleek, and transportation of the future. And at this point is when they were really focusing on the big steel hulls and everything. I also found kind of interesting that these were the first ships in the fleet to have AC and heating units. I'm not quite sure like if that meant all across the ship or what, because back in those days, the ships sailed year round. And I don't know if it was just the steam heat that kind of heated them, but I found that to be very interesting. And so I know around that time, the air conditioning was a huge technology breakthrough. So it was a huge passenger amenity. That was really important. So the Spartan has not sailed since 1979, and she is parked in Ludington. And although it's very unfortunate that she doesn't sail anymore, she serves a very important purpose of supplying parts to the Badger. It's true. So at that time, the Spartan had to kind of wait for her sister ship, the Badger, to be built. And they had quite the fanfare for a double christening here in Sturgeon Bay. And so this picture here on the right is the Badger launching, and that is actually the Spartan in the background. And so the Spartan was christened by Mrs. John Hanna, the president of Michigan State College, which would eventually become Michigan State University. And at the time, the ships were widely advertised as CNO's $10 million double feature. And they made a really big deal about them being known as the twins. So when the Badger was actually launched, she created quite the splash, as the Spartan was launched in January. So there's a lot of frozen water, it was very cold. So the Badger was actually christened by Mrs. Walter Kohler, the wife of the Wisconsin governor. And so what they did here on the right, that's actually the Spartan in the background. They placed all these rail cars along the gangway there. And because they expected some water, they usually would just place sandbags. They actually tied the cars down and placed sandbags to protect them. And the wave was still way too large that it actually toppled over multiple car ferries, or the rail cars there. So you can see them all in disarray. But they expected that there was about 1,000 people in attendance for the launch. So the Badger entered into service on March 21st, 1953. And so Ludington was founded as a lumbering town, which brought the railroads, which then brought the car ferries. And so the car ferries were a very big deal in Ludington. I know they're a very big deal all over the Great Lakes, but as a proud Ludington native, I can tell you that Ludington was the largest car ferry port in the world in the 1930s. So Ludington at the peak was home to 9 different car ferries. And the Badger is the last of the legacy of those steamers that came in and out of Ludington. So they were built for year-round service. And so the Badger and the Spartan have what is considered a specially designed hull to break the ice. And that was a major part of how she was able to sail year-round. They were built for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. And the term car ferry actually comes from rail cars. In later years, they tried to rebrand her as an auto ferry, and it just never stuck, and car ferry is what we're known as today. So I think it's really important to note the railroad beginnings, because that's why we have the Badger. And the Badger was built how the railroad built everything, sturdy and strong. And so from her lifetime, she carried railroads or rail cars till the late 80s, as the railroad business started to dry up in the mid 70s. And so even though she was built for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, which absorbed the Pure Marquette Railway in 1947. So a lot of people kind of thought as the Ludington route as like the PM corridor. So this is something that I just recently came across, this newspaper article from the Manitowoc Herald Times. And even though they were identically built and they're known as the twins, I often joke that they're actually fraternal twins. And that I got a chuckle out of someone. Thank you. So in 1964, the Badger was actually laterally cut, and 18 inches were added to make her taller to accommodate for taller rail cars at the time. There's actually quotes and conversations about doing the same to the Spartan and the city of Midland, and it never took place because after the Badger, it kind of just wasn't needed anymore with expanding rail cars through Chicago. And so this was known as Operation Raising the Deck. And I don't know why, but I always thought of when I heard this, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Like actually making the boat taller, which would be no easy feat no matter which way you do it. I always thought they did it at the top. Why, I don't know. They actually did it at the car deck. And so what they did in this, I don't know if you can all read all of that, but basically what they did is it took 150 employees roughly from the Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company, and they cut it at the car deck, and it took about a week to cut it. And then it took about, 3.5 hours to actually, like, they had the hydraulic jacks, and they had two people that would just simultaneously hit it at the same time to raise it the 18 inches. So think about that, 150 people, 3.5 hours, 18 inches. So I think it's kind of cool to think about. And because of doing this, excuse me, is why we're still able to carry many of the loads that we have today. So the Badger is the last and largest coal-fired car ferry that was ever built. And the Badger is the last passenger steamship in operation in the Great Lakes and possibly the country. And so one of the many updates is that when you look at this picture here on the left, we do not have passengers enter via gangplank anymore. But I think it's just kind of fun to see over time as these people entering the ship, and then the picture here on the right, you see the people sitting there of how big the ship really is. And so when the ship was actually built, passenger traffic was secondary. But at this time, when they were building car ferries and thinking about amenities and such, they were noticing that more and more people were choosing the car ferries as a mode of transportation. And so that's why they kind of made her bigger than they did. It was a big economic boost to the communities. I am probably one of the few employees, I should say corporate employees at the Badger, who didn't have like a grandfather or father who worked at the car ferries. I had like an uncle, cousins, and all that I joked that I became a Ludington native once I started working at the Badger. So there is a lot of people who moved to Ludington to work on the car ferries. There's a lot of people who've moved between Ludington and Manitowoc for the car ferries as well. So a few Badger facts to understand how big she is. She's 410 feet long, 59.5 feet wide at her beam, 7 stories tall, 6,650 tons dispersed. She can carry up to 160 to 180 cars, depending on the load size. Today, that may be more like 150 or so, depending on RVs, campers, things like that. And our average speed is about 14 knots or 16 miles per hour. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but she is a little faster these days. Excuse me. And then if you were to walk around this upper deck here 6 laps, you would get a mile. So if you're looking to travel and get your steps in, you only have to do 6 laps. I've done it. It's not that hard. It's kind of fun. While docking, the Badger backs into port. A lot of people are stunned to see that she actually reverses into port as everything enters and exits from the aft or the back part of the ship. And she is not equipped with bow thrusters, which essentially are propellers on the sides of the ship that help her move side to side. And so she relies heavily on her anchors, engines, aft pilot house, wind speed, and direction for docking. So it's a very intricate process. So with the vision of Charles Conrad, the Badger was relaunched in 1992 and became more of the passenger sailing experience on Lake Michigan between Ludington, Michigan, and Manitowoc, Wisconsin. So this man here on the left, Charles Conrad, he was a local entrepreneur who went on to have a really successful career. And after C&O, it was then Michigan, Wisconsin Transit Authority. And then that was when they really needed to cease, or I shouldn't say needed, but that was when there really was no more use for the rail cars. And so Charles Conrad said, you know what, I really like those car ferries and I don't want to see them go away. And so he really had that futuristic idea of hauling all different types of cargo and freight. So if it wasn't for Charles, we wouldn't have the Badger today. And now we only sail between Ludington and Manitowoc, where she used to sail into Milwaukee and Kewaunee as well. And at this time is when the car deck was leveled off. So you can still see the rail ties on the car deck, but it's all flat. So any type of vehicle can drive on there. So in 2016, the Badger was named a National Historic Landmark. And this was largely due to her engines and propulsion, in that she is largely authentic to 1953. She's also unique in that she's the second National Historic Landmark that moves, If you follow our Facebook page, you may know the other one. I think it's really interesting that the first National Historic Landmark to move was the San Francisco rail cars. So I think when you look at the just railroad history and everything, I think it's kind of a neat tie. And I had looked it up. There's only about 2,500 National Historic Landmarks throughout the country, and most of them are buildings, sites, objects that they're really, I thought there'd be more that involved transportation, but from what I found, there really wasn't. So in her time, the Badger has quite the legacy of honors. And one I think is very important to note is that in 1996, her propulsion system is designated a mechanical engineering landmark by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. You think about that, that was close to 30 years ago. And here we are in looking at our 2023 season already, and just amazing to see how she's really stood the test of time. I won't read through all of these, but the Badger is very unique in that she is a registered historical site in 2 states, in Michigan and Wisconsin, obviously, but you don't normally see that. So it's a very unique distinction that you just don't see anywhere. And the newest of this legacy of honors that I'll talk about here in a second is that earlier this year, we were named a maritime highway or a marine highway. So today, the Badger carries semis, buses, RVs, campers, cars, motorcycles, and more. So pretty much if you can move it, we can take it. We take lots of different cargo every day. It's an ever-moving puzzle of, it's 410 feet long. Obviously, our cargo deck is slightly smaller than that, but we fill it as full as we can. Some of the most notable loads include the Budweiser Clydesdales, the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, the LL Bean Bootmobile. I've seen pictures, I haven't seen it in person, but it's like a literal boot on wheels. We've taken a banana car, and then just south of Ludington, we are home to a wind turbine farm. And I should know, but I want to say it's about 50 wind turbines. And they were built here in Wisconsin, and it was way too much time, money, effort to ship them all the way around down through Chicago. And so all the pieces came across on the Badger. So it's kind of cool to see. And I've seen, pieces come on and off, and just navigating through the historic downtown Ludington was kind of crazy, but they fit them on the Badger with just inches apart. So today we have a long list of fun amenities that we offer on the Badger. And I should have asked, has anyone sailed with us before? Have any of you played Badger Bingo before? Oh, yes, yes, yes. I hope you won something. Good, good, I'm glad you did. And we have lots of people who sail with us just to play bingo, and it's a lot of fun. But we also offer food, beverage. We have a museum, gift shop, movie theater, and much, much more. We have lots of indoor and outdoor seating. It is 4 hours to cross Lake Michigan. We often have people who are like, oh my gosh, 4 hours, what am I gonna do? Then those people get off and say, oh my gosh, 4 hours is not enough, we need to come back. One thing lately that we've noticed, we have children's activities and adults. A lot of the adults love doing the scavenger hunt, so it's kind of fun. So there's lots of different things to do while you're on board. So looking at the layout of the Badger, this main deck here on the bottom, this is where you would first enter on the main floor where a majority of our amenities are. So you'll see in the forward here where it's museum, gift shop, movie lounge, all of that. Those were all originally staterooms. And so when the boat was built, like I was saying, they were focusing, the passenger traffic was secondary to the railroad. But the big amenities, if you will, is that they offered white linen dining services, and they offered staterooms. And so it was just kind of the perfect, if you need to get to Milwaukee, you needed to get to Kewaunee or Manitowoc, however, you could rest and eat on your way there. And so something I learned more recently this year is where all of these middle rooms are, they originally offered showers in all of those staterooms, which we don't offer anymore. But all of these exterior rooms there are staterooms. So they are rentable, $54. They include beds, private toilet, sink, chair, window to look out. So if you're looking to rest, I often get people ask me, why should I rent one of those? It's up to you. But if you just want to take a nap, some people with young children, semi-truck drivers like to sleep in them. So it's just kind of something a little different that you don't see in a lot of other ships. And then the upper deck here, like I was saying, if you walk in the whole outer lap of the ship, or the 6 laps there, you get the mile. So there's lots of fun. This cabana room back here, this actually used to be all open, that when they built the boat, I'll show you this cross section here, you can kind of get an idea. They would actually have this big ramp that went up, and it was kind of scary looking. That growing up in Ludington, I remember this ramp. This was way before I like had a driver's license, but I'm thinking like, man, that'd be like so fun to like sled down it, because like the angle of it. And now as like an adult, I'm like, wow, that must have been really scary driving up. But they would actually drive cars. They would sometimes park them on the bow, but it was out in the back of the ship is where they would park the cars. So it's kind of touted as travel on the car ferry, take your car with you, do a road trip sort of thing. But this also gives you an idea, you can't see it super well, but in the bow of the ship, we have an upper car deck. And so that was kind of a way that we saw space and ways to fit more cars on. So if I'll go back to this one really quickly. So like the cabana room, that is where they would park. So now it's an actually enclosed room that we host shoreline cruises and different things. But we still have the bingo, main lounge, all the fun stuff to do in between. So I have to give the online gift shop a plug really quick, is that a lot of people are always like, oh my gosh, I can't sail. Our Badger gift shop has had a nice revamp this last year. So lots of fun different items in the gift shop to enjoy: apparel, books, homeware, home decor, lots of fun different things. But one thing I always like to mention too is that we have some really great books about the Badger, Carferry's, Manitowoc. Just these are really great pictorial timelines of the boat. But one thing that we've kind of slowly started announcing, but I've been working with Art Chavez, who wrote the book here, the second to the left there, The Images of America SS Badger. I'm working with him on a second edition, and this is actually the cover of it here. So you heard it here first, folks. We are coming out with a new edition, and it will have about 30 to 36 color spreads. So it has more, because the first edition was printed in 2003. And just from 2003 to now, we've had a lot of updates and fun things going on. So I'm really excited for that to come out. Also, when you sail on the Badger, I always like to throw this out there too. We do offer discounts to groups of 10 or more passengers. So this is a perfect opportunity for a work retreat, family reunion, you know, if you're looking to do something kind of fun, because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to go with my family, and a lot of times don't even realize that they can qualify for a group discount. And then something too that I have been focusing on more is our mini cruises and shoreline cruises. I get it. Sometimes you just don't need to get across the lake to Michigan. Although I think Michigan's really fun to visit, a shoreline cruise gives you a really great option to sail up and down for 2 hours on the shoreline. They offer food, live entertainment. It's a great way to see the ship, see the shoreline, and just do something a little fun, maybe make a date night out of it. And then we also offer a 48-hour mini cruise without an auto. So if you just want to go over to Ludington, walk around for a while, we do have a few taxi services. So it is pretty navigable. You can drive around there easily. It's been a long day. Thank you. So you can get around Ludington pretty easily, but that's something I also like to throw out there too if you're looking to do a weekend trip. So like I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million times again. I am a proud Ludington native, and I am very honored to say I share a hometown with the Badger. And if you haven't been to Ludington in a while, it is really nice to visit, especially this time of year. House of Flavors ice cream, the Port of Ludington Maritime Museum. Our beaches have been named #1 in Michigan for multiple years. That was one thing that I felt really bad about, that I didn't know until I got older, how lucky we are on the Michigan side to have sandy beaches. So like when you sail into Ludington, you get a beautiful front row view of multiple sand dunes and just sand in general. So if you haven't been to Ludington in a while, you definitely need to visit. And so this is normally the point in my presentation, and actually now I think about it, this is the first presentation I've done outside of Michigan. When I get to it, the Manitowoc side, and I'm like, beer and cheese, do I need to say anything more? And everyone laughs, but you guys understand that. So, but if you haven't been to Manitowoc lately, they are doing a lot of really fun things to kind of revitalize the city, and they have so many fun things going on that I feel very fortunate to have a sister port city and have two great cities, two great states to really market. So if you haven't been to the Farm Wisconsin Discovery Center, that is awesome. I grew up on a farm and I'm like so excited to go there every time and just learn about farming. And they actually can like bring cows in, and they have like a birthing barn where you can watch them give birth. So I just think that's super cool. It's like really nerdy of me, but there's just a lot of fun things going on in Manitowoc. So at the end of 2020, the Badger and Lake Michigan Carferry was bought by Interlake Maritime Services. And so now we are part of their family of freighters and boats and things. Interlake comes to us with a wonderful heritage of sailing on the Great Lakes. They have operated 9 freighters all over the Great Lakes, and they just launched a new one, that their 10th, that is sailing, is the first freighter to be built on the Great Lakes in 40 years, but you probably don't know that. So it was been really fun working with Interlake and just learning more about them and what they do, and that they just have a great appreciation and respect for historic ships. So the Badger has a bright future ahead of her. So what's new in 2022? And I'm sure all of you are aware, the Badger was here for dry dock last year, and I gotta say, we had such a warm welcome. I wasn't physically on the boat when they brought her over, but just the love and support we felt from Door County and Sturgeon Bay in general was well received in Ludington and beyond. It's really kind of funny of like, when I tell people I'm from Ludington, they're like, oh yeah, have you ever ridden that big boat? And so I'm like, yeah, I've heard of it. I'm like, yeah, and then it's just funny of like, you really don't have to go far to hear people talk about the Badger. So it's always cool to say, you know, even though Ludington may be the home port, we have this really awesome connection with Door County. So she completed her 5-year annual dry dock inspection, and anything that needed to be addressed and was taken care of by the shipyard. So one of the cool things about it is that she received the brand new paint job consisting of 800 gallons. So she was here for about, was that 2 months or so? So the thing that I think is really cool is I got to come over and see her in dry dock, and it was an amazing experience that all of you people that live here locally, I'm kind of jealous of, that you just get to have all of this like cool maritime stuff happening in your backyard. And so the Badger propeller is 13 feet 10 inches in diameter. And so this is a person standing next to it inspecting. So it is a really great visual of like how big they truly are. Because in the second picture here, they have taken the propellers off so they could do some maintenance and testing of them. It's just amazing to just see her out of water. Like, I actually like stood underneath the Badger, and like all 5'3" of me was like standing there. I'm like, wow, like this is crazy. I'm standing underneath the Badger. And I had a lot of people asking me questions. That just amazing to me, the work that everyone does at Bay Fincantieri. And just like, I'm standing like, what if this were to fall on me? But luckily it doesn't happen. And then here is an aerial photo in the third. And then the fourth is when they were bringing her back to Ludington. That was in mid-January of this year, and they had to break up the ice. And so when she went over, it was cold in November. A lot of people were very confused about how the painting works, and that they placed the tarps over her. And so the Badger looks as beautiful as ever. It took 800 gallons. They sandblasted her down to the bare metal, and we're pretty sure that this hasn't happened since her railroad days. We're not exactly quite sure, but she has had, you know, spot touches and paint here and there when needed. So I think it was probably the 70s may have been the last time that she was actually painted. So it only took 800 gallons, and I was actually reading somewhere when they originally painted her, It only took about 400 gallons. I think some of that might be the red and gray that's in there that are just they counted it differently. I really don't know. And so, like I mentioned, the Badger has been officially named or an official component of the U.S. Marine Highway System. And so we have a new plaque on here. And basically this is part of our US 10 continuation. The Marine Highway Designation is a program that supports the increased use of the nation's navigable. I think I said it right.
Nailed it.
Thank you. Well, now I have it like written in front of me. Okay. So just let's do that a little bit earlier. Waterways to relieve landslide congestion, provide new and efficient transportation options, and increase the productivity of the surface transportation system. By working closely with public and private organizations, the American Marine Highway Program helps create and sustain American jobs in U.S. ports, on vessels, and at shipyards, while also improving our supply chain. So this basically opens up the Badger to apply for funding to modernize and improve the services of the Badger. And so we have the new decal of the Marine Highway System, and we have added back the National Historic Emblem that a lot of people were very concerned about that when we returned from the shipyard. So it is back up there as of this last month. And so like I was mentioning, so she is a Marine Highway, but back in 2015, she became a continued a US 10 continual designation. So US Highway 10 is 565 miles long and connects 4 states. So essentially you can get on US Highway 10 in Bay City, go across to Ludington, get on the Badger, go across from Manitowoc all the way through and end up in Fargo, North Dakota. And it's very unique in that we are one of 2 US highway ferry connections. The other is US Highway 9 that goes north to south through New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. And this is the Cape May Lewes from Lewis, Delaware to North Cape May, New Jersey. And so this is a big connection to other interstates that reach the heart of the US. So a lot of other people have been asking, well, what's new? What's new? We see the outside painting of the ship. So one of the things is that we have done some interior updates that Interlake has decided that they wanted to focus on the crew areas first. They see that our crew works very hard, and I was very in support of this decision. Between our engine, navigation, deck department, we have about 40 employees who actually live on board, who are sharing, so they live on the Badger, make sure she's running as she needs to continually. And so they're sharing their home with thousands of passengers a year. And we have employees who come all the way from Florida, North Carolina. We have some currently from New York. We've had them come from all over the US. So Interlake said, we really want to take care of our crew members and, honor them. So we did a lot of updates to the crew areas that you wouldn't necessarily see from the outside. So as of the passenger area updates, we do have an updated arcade room. So we have brought back some Pac-Man video type games. And it's been really fun to see the kids being really excited, but then the parents are like, oh no, I'm gonna school you in Pac-Man today. And I've seen a few little fights break out. It's been kind of funny, but it's all in good spirit. We have an onboard video entertainment system that basically you can get different shows, movies, and things on your own device. So this is one I have not personally experienced much of, but we have an updated men's restroom on board. Women's is next, and I hear a lot of compliments saying, thank you, that update was very much needed. So you're very welcome. I'll take your word for it, but it is very nice. And one of the newest updates is that we now have the Starlink internet. They just came out with the marine grade package this summer, and it is an upgrade. We're still learning some quirks with it, and it works very well. Also this year, we brought on Hans and Greta, the 2 up here in the upper right, to join our canine detection dog team. So we have 4 dogs. So this one is Dara, Mika, Greta, and Hans. And so they actually come to us from Poland. They're all born, bred, raised for detection work. Excuse me. And so they are a very important part of our team keeping us safe. They come here to us with a partnership that we've built with Mid-Michigan Police Canine out of Midland, Michigan. And it's just amazing to see these dogs work. And I'm not a favorites kind of person, but I get really excited when I see our furry canine friends here, part of our team, because they really are well loved and they're very much our dogs, but they're working dogs. And the one story that gets me, one of Greta, apparently in her off day went through and chewed her handler's boat fenders. And it's just like, she's just so chill. It's like, I can't imagine her doing this. Like, oh, let me show you pictures. She definitely did it. So they live with their handlers year round. They go through trainings all throughout the year. And they are just a wonderful addition. That Dara and Mika are a little bit older. Dara is 7, Mika is 6, Greta is 2, and Hans is 1.5. So they're still in training and just working with them. So like I mentioned, the Badger has a very bright future. Looking ahead at the Badger's long-term sustainability, we have embarked on research and discussions on what her future fuel source could be. With more emissions restrictions expected in 2025, we are in the early stages of investigating new potential fuel sources for the Badger. While we are pre-authorized or grandfathered in to burn coal, simply hoping to maintain that status is not a viable business plan or action moving forward. A potential fuel conversion requires significant planning, time, and financial resources. The Badger's historic legacy is unrivaled and something we proudly celebrate. We continue to invest in her future and look for ways to ensure her longevity on the lakes. So at this time, we are in the research phase. Where that could take us, we're not exactly sure at this time, but it is something that we're prepared for if there were to need something to happen. But for the time being, she is keeping her current fuel source. So our 2022 sailing season has been a lot of fun. It's been a busy year. It's amazing to see all of the new faces, returning faces, and people who get on board and have no idea that they are sailing on a National Historic Landmark. That is amazing to see, just the passengers that sail with us. So our season does go through October 16th. So there's a little bit of time still if you haven't sailed with us this year, if we're thinking about taking a sail. But every year our season is mid-May to mid-October. We don't have our dates quite set for next year yet, but we'll hopefully have that announced this fall. So follow along on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, as we have lots of fun things in the works, as next year the Badger is celebrating her 70th anniversary. So it's amazing to see where she's been in that time and where she's going. But again, I really appreciate your time and just sharing your evening with me, that I'd be open to any questions if we have any. Yes.
As a National Historic Landmark, is there restrictions now on how you can alter the Badger? Because sometimes that happens with historic buildings and things. And I'm not sure if it's National Historic Landmarks, but those kind of registered historical things sometimes comes with baggage on what you're actually allowed to do with it once registered.
No, that's a great question. And that is part of our research phase. So we're not quite sure if or how that status may be affected, but that's something we're thinking about in our research phase going forward of how that may affect it. So at this time, she's a National Historic Landmark and will continue to be. Thank you. Yes, in the front here.
What's the outlook of finding another captain so you can resume that?
Thank you. So she was asked, if you didn't hear her question, she was asking about finding a second captain. And so this is something we're still currently researching. And so I kind of mentioned with the docking, that is a huge part of being the captain. So that just takes a lot of skill, a lot of time, and something that we're hoping we'll find. We have some prospects that we've talked to, and it just takes a lot of training. And it's hard to do a lot of training in the off season. So it's something that we're looking forward to for next year.
Okay.
Back here.
Is there a specific reason for the dogs being on the boat?
So they're searching for different explosives and detection in that regard. So they are something that we have had a part of our team and crew since 2011, or I'm sorry, 2001. But then the reason we have the 4 of them is so that they can train together And we'll have multiple dogs on a shift, so then they get breaks in between. Yes.
Is there a reason she's towed to Sturgeon Bay versus under?
Great question. And so that's one of the things that I love about the Badger is I could literally talk to you all day and stand here about all the little quirks and things. So the reason that she was towed to Sturgeon Bay instead of going under her own power is that it takes a lot of time, resources, and energy that once we end our season in mid-October, I mean, that layout process starts as soon as we get to dock. So it's a lot of people, because of her engines being so historic, that a lot of people don't understand. You don't just like flip a switch. And so a lot of times that process can take days of turning off the engines. So last year it was just way more feasible and easier to tow her instead of turning the power plant back on. Great question. And then one thing I did forget to mention that I was going to talk about is I was saying that she's going a little faster these days. So something we were aware of when we got the new paint, but there's a lot of days that she's been averaging about 15.5 knots and instead of like up from her normal 14 because of just being more slick in the paint. So that's been one of the nice parts of the new paint job that we've been really appreciative of. It's just helping her be a little faster. Any other questions? Back there. So as a Ludington native, it was really cool to kind of see, you know, the Ludington community, and Ludington loves the Badger. And so we're very appreciative of such great community support. One of the ways I describe it is that Ludington loves the Badger. Manitowoc freaking loves the Badger. And I should say Wisconsin in general. And you know, and I've had a lot of people ask because they're like, well, we see you didn't keep the Spartan, like you kept the Badger, like you had good thinking there. And so it wasn't until it was funny because like as a local, there's so much I knew about the Badger, and obviously I continue to learn more in this job. And that's one of the things I'm very thankful and love. And so it's just funny of like when I go to Wisconsin, people are like, you know, like there's Badger this, Badger that. I'm like, no, I'm with the Bachelor of Carferry. And you're like, what? The Badger? So it's really funny to see like when you go to Manitowoc and people are like, oh yeah, they have a lot of ownership over the boat, which is pretty fun. But then I feel like I come up to Door County and people are like, oh no, I helped build her. We have the real authority here. So it's a toss up, but it's all good. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Are you here in the front?
So the Spartan is idle now, 79.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's just parts right now. So it's basically a Hulk. It's probably decommissioned.
Yes. And so we often get a lot of questions about the Spartan, and it's amazing to see how many people love the Badger, and there are just as many people who love the Spartan. I personally have not been on the Spartan, but it would take a lot of time and resources to really convert her too much. So at this time, there are no plans for the Spartan. She's going to continue to stay there. You know, there's always talks about what could become of her, but she does serve a very important purpose of supplying parts to the Badger. So she'll stay there for the time being. Yeah.
Other than the car ferry, what also came along with the car ferry was the tug and barge, correct?
Oh, yes. So
You see her every couple weeks.
yeah, yep. So when Interlake bought the Badger, so our technical business name is Lake Michigan Carferry. When they bought us, they also bought our sister company, which was called Pure Marquette Shipping, which is now Interlake Logistics Solutions. So that was a part of the buy, as well as the Spartan. And so the tug barge, that is actually, the barge is the former city of Midland. Yep, Knoll Ferry. Yep.
Shelby, we have a question from one of our Zoom viewers.
Awesome.
Are fireworks that were purchased from Michigan allowed on the Badger?
That's a great question. I would have to say no. Well, you can't launch them off the Badger, that's for sure. I don't know about fireworks, because I know that there's a lot of, well, I would have to say Michigan, last I knew, was pretty strict on their fireworks laws, that they really aren't all that impressive sometimes, if you ask me. But that's a good question. I've never been asked that one. That if they were in a locked vehicle, that would be a different story, but I don't think we have a lot of people who bring fireworks across that I would have to think you could probably buy more impressive fireworks in Wisconsin, but I guess I've never shopped for them here. How funny. Yes, back here.
What's the cost across? Everything cars.
So he was asking about the cost and how we load the ships. So a one-way adult ticket this time of year is $61. And I say this time of year that we do kind of a special pricing in the spring and fall. So our main season is 71. Round trip, trying to think that number off the top of my head. There's a price break if you do a round trip, so it's not quite double. And then passenger fare is separate from vehicle fare. So just so you're aware on that. So as for loading the ship, when you look at the car deck, it's kind of a clockwork type situation. So certain vehicles can be driven straight on, and then basically if you think of it like there's a middle support beam, there's an opening in the very front of the bow. So like I have a Buick Regal that can be driven around no problem. If you bring like a camper on board, that will be backed on board. A semi, bus, all of those will be driven by their professional drivers. So we actually employ what we call car runners, and there are people who help unload the ship. That is something that a lot of people are kind of surprised about, is that everything kind of enters and exits at the same spot. So all of our crew drives the cars on, so passengers don't have to worry about all the nitty gritty of getting it parked in there. A story I love to tell is one of my neighbors. He was a car runner back in the day, and he was telling me that he paid for cotton. This was a kind of a common Ludington story of people would go work on the Badger for the summer, winters, and that's how they paid for college. He was telling me that they were incentivized back in the day of 25 cents per car. So that's why they would run. And so it's kind of funny of like, wow, think about like how many people would run for 25 cents. I wouldn't, but it's kind of funny to think about. So all of our car runners will help load the boat. And then so the idea is that once you get to the opposite side of the lake, all of the cars will drive off straight. So then you don't have to worry about backing them out.
Shelby, we have another question online. Is the Spartan hull ever inspected below the waterline for corrosive damage from quagga mussels?
So as for inspecting the Spartan's hull underneath the water, that I'm honestly not sure of, but we do have crew members that do rounds and inspections and such. So she is well taken care of in that regard, that they make sure that she is safe, that she is still floating. I know that there's a lot of like heat and things that go on in there. So really, like they do inspections that such, like she's just left there and no one ever looks. I'm not sure as to what hull type of inspections they may do. That's a good question. Yes, right here.
Where do you get coal from?
Yeah, so all of our coal is actually sourced from the Wisconsin side. So most of our coal actually comes from Green Bay area. And it's actually, so then it's trucked to Manitowoc. And so every day when we go to Manitowoc, they have a coal truck that backs on. We open a hatch on the car deck and they drop all the coal there. So it's all from Wisconsin. And I don't know much about it, although I know that it's ethically sourced. Any other questions? I appreciate the thoughtful questions and conversations.
Somebody wants to add that before the decade ends, there'll be a need for car ferries between Miami and Cuba. They want to know if the Spartan would fit that bill.
And I know that there is some debate online about this. And so due to the fact that the Spartan has loaned a lot of parts to the Badger, it would take quite a bit of time and resources that I doubt before the end of the decade, although that's very wishful thinking. And I know in shipyards, they work very fast. That I know, I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but I know it'd take a lot of time and resources that I doubt it would happen. Although I do like that idea, and being that she is coal-fired, it would take quite a while to get down to Cuba, Miami area as well.
Or anywhere.
Or anywhere, yes, indeed.
And then how many tons of coal is burned for a trip across the lake?
That's a great question, and that's one of the ones that I don't remember the number, and that's something I've been meaning to look up. I apologize, I don't know the number, but I know it's about a truckload. So think of like a semi truckload is what they'll usually fill every day or every other day.
Then somebody else is asking, where do the coal ashes end up?
Oh, this is a great question. And so, as some people may be aware of some of our coal ash issues in the past, we have a really awesome state-of-the-art ash retention system, and it's the only thing like it. And it was instituted in 2014-15. And what it is basically all of the coal ash is on a conveyor, basically vacuumed up, if you will, and put into ash bins that are on our car deck. And so every night when we get to Ludington, they are offloaded with a forklift, and it's about 4 or 5 bins or so that they'll empty at a time, and it's actually upcycled into asphalt products. So it's kind of interesting that it goes from one mode of transportation to another. Great question.
All right, any other questions for Shelby this evening? No? All right, Shelby,
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, well,
here
thank
in
you again
Michigan.
for having me.
Thank you so much to everyone online for joining us as well. You can see us here the first Thursday of November, which, let me cheat really quick, is the 3rd. Is the 3rd to talk about the Maritime Academy and the awesome fleet of vessels that they have over there.